Hello everybody, welcome back. I am excited about this video. This is going to be Karma Yogam as a whole. I kind of alluded to this a little bit in my last video, and to be honest, it is something that I talk about a lot. I've been posting on TikTok and Instagram for about 4 years now, and although I didn't have the focus of Karma Yogam or say those words, I feel like I've been sort of talking about it, and I think a lot of us do talk about it. You hear in media all the time, do things without expecting the result, or just work hard. This mentality that we have, and I know for sure that Western countries, especially America, really believes in this concept. However, I want to kind of stress the importance of Karma Yogam before we get into the Jnana Yogam and the Bhakti Yogam. Sri Krishna really talks about this in detail. And even when we get into sort of the Jnana Yogam and the Bhakti Yogam aspects of things, where arguably those are a little bit harder to do, just as normal everyday people, he still references do your duty, do your Karma Yogam. And I think that's essentially what Karma Yogam is. Karma Yogam is just doing your duty without the expectation of the result. And in this video, I want to talk about what it is, why it's important, and kind of how to practice it on a day-to-day basis. Let's talk about what is Karma Yogam. Karma Yogam can be seen in chapter 2, Slokam 47, where he says, "You have the right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty." And that 2.47 is so incredibly important. And the reason why Sri Krishna talks about it so much is because he knows who we are. He knows our capability. Again, I'm going to reference when Bhagavad Gita was given to us. It was given to us near the end of the Dwapara Yugam during the Kurukshetra. He knew, hey, the Kali Yugam is about to start. Let's give them this text so that they have something to reference. And they meaning us, right? And I think the most important thing is that we have a lot of responsibilities to take care of, right? Just normal everyday people. We have to take care of our spouse. We have to take care of our children. We have to take care of our parents, our household, bills, finances, our jobs, school, right? All of us have a job, right? All of us have a duty, whether you're a student, whether you are somebody who's employed, whether you are somebody who takes care of children, right? There's a duty that all of us have. And so we have to reference what is our prescribed duty, right? For me, I'm a 26, almost 27-year-old girl. I'm married, and so I have a duty as a wife. I have a duty as a daughter. I have a duty to my in-laws, to my parents. I have a duty to my society. And then I also have a duty to myself, right? And I think that this concept of what is our duty, I actually talked about this in our summer solstice documentary, and it's really interesting to see what everyone has to say about what their duty is, because I sort of flat out asked that question to 6 different individuals, and I said, hey, what is your duty? And as a creative person, you sort of have this feeling where your duty is your craft. But at the end of the day, your duty is also what your dharma is, what your sastrams say. And I think that just kind of falling back to what is my day-to-day work can kind of give you that, answer on what your duty is. And it does differ between all of us. Sometimes it's sort of okay, my duty is to myself, right? I kind of have to have the oxygen mask on first before I can aid others. And I think it's interesting that we as a society are more likely to help other people than we are ourselves. We're more likely to go pick up our friend from the airport because they called us and said, hey, can you pick me up at 4 o'clock in the morning? But that same appointment that we have at 4 o'clock in the morning for ourselves to meditate, we likely won't show up for that. And I find that to be really interesting, that we often are wanting to help other people, or, wanting to be there for others rather than be there for ourselves. And I think this Karma Yogam sort of says hey, do that job, do the duty of going to pick up your friend from the airport, especially if you've committed to picking your friend up from the airport, but also go back to the promises that you've made to yourself. I want to pray, or I want to be more spiritually inclined, or I told myself I was going to read these books. I want to participate in Navaratri. I didn't even say Happy Navaratri. Happy Navaratri. I want to participate in Navaratri. I want to set up the gulu. I want to go to my friend's house. I want to see everyone's gulu. Like all of those different things. Like, we have all these promises that we make to society and to ourselves, and it's really about upkeeping them. But to add another layer to that, it's to do your duty and not expect the result of anything. And so I go back to this example all the time, but it's like giving a presentation at work. Like my boss, he will always give me presentations at work. He knows that I speak well, and he knows that like I'm good at like consolidating information, whatever. And so he says, okay, Janani, you go present, right? I cannot expect a promotion just because I do a bunch of presentations. And even if I do it well, I don't necessarily need to expect a good job from my boss. And same thing with like the friend from the airport. I'm gonna go pick up my friend from the airport, but I am not going to expect them to necessarily show up for me if I need a ride from the airport or to the airport. And I think when we start getting into these like really personal examples, we start talking about like boundaries. And I get this question all the time, so we'll save that and we'll refer back to this when we talk about how to practice Karma Yogam. But just in terms of like a definition, do your duty and do not expect any result or any sort of outcome. And that like expectation, right? They always say like expectation is the thief of joy. This is what they're referring to. We have to, again, I want to talk about like why the Bhagavad Gita is given to us. I feel like it's really important to understand and sort of have that like ground foundation that the Bhagavad Gita and any sort of text, any religious text, is supposed to aid you in suffering, right? And I think like suffering is an important concept to understand as well. Suffering is essentially, the way that I've understood it, is anything that brings us back to this samsara. Anything that brings us back into this cycle of life. And like right now we're in samsara, right? This is life. We're in the cycle. Our soul has been here so many times. We have no idea how many times, right? And so all we can do is try to not go back into the cycle of samsara, right? And to ask Bhagavan, please give me moksham. Please bring me back to you. And so if we don't want to be a part of this samsara, we really have to make sure that we're not attached to anything worldly. We can't have any sort of attachment to anything in our lifetime. And it's a great place to start with Karma Yogam, because we all have work to do. And so what better place to start than the work that we have, right? We don't necessarily need to read all of these books, and we don't need to have this like really, really, advanced spiritual practice. You don't need to do like all of the steps in the morning or the afternoon or the evening in order to perform Karma Yogam. I think it's beneficial to have Sri Krishna in mind when you do all of your work, so that you're automatically sort of giving your palan and all of the things that come from the work right to God anyway. At least that's how I feel like I've been able to understand Karma Yogam, is like while I'm doing my presentation or while I'm doing work or while I'm cooking or while I'm making this video, it's like I'm doing this for God, right? I'm not expecting YouTube views or subscribers or any sort of like good things that come from this. I enjoy talking about this. I enjoy, partaking in this religion. I enjoy the spiritual practice of it, and that's that. I don't necessarily need a congratulations or even moksham to continue doing this work, right? And so having any sort of expectation can lead us back into the samsara, because it forms an attachment to that action and also forms an attachment to this world, right? And I think that's like the most crucial part as to why we need to practice Karma Yogam and why it's beneficial. It's that I no longer want to be attached, and I'm not going to be attached. So now let's talk about how to practice Karma Yoga. I'm going to refer to chapter 2, Slokam 38 for this explanation. And this is where he starts to talk about sukha-duḥkhe. And he basically says, do fight for the sake of fighting without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat. And by doing so, you shall never incur sin. And Krishna basically now says that Arjuna should fight for the sake of fighting because he is a Kshatriya. That is his duty. His duty is to protect his nation. His duty is to protect the people from adharma. And, he needs to go into battle without necessarily expecting or any sort of fear of pain or pleasure from that. His duty is merely to fight. So go do that, right? And we can translate that into our lives. Our duty is basically to just work. So just do that. Our duty is to be there for our family. So do that. Our duty is to be there for our children, for our friends, for our community. So do that. To expect anything back to us as a result of us doing an action will always land us back in samsara because it, again, forms an attachment to this world. It's having this obsession with the worldly affairs. I guess think about the mechanics of what happens when you relinquish the desire, when you relinquish attachment. What happens to you? You start to have that sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where you say, you know what? I'm happy with the work that I've done. When you just say those little words, right? I'm happy with the work that I've done. I'm proud of myself. I am happy. I am at peace. What does that do? See, my voice just automatically lowers, right? I automatically just feel a lot calmer because it's true. When I start to say the words, I am at peace, I am happy, I no longer need somebody else to give me that. I no longer need my friend who I dropped off at the airport, right? If I drop them off at the airport and I'm thinking, oh, they owe me. I did this big favor for them. Now they owe me. What is that going to do? Now, next time I talk to them, I'm going to have that in the back of my mind when I talk to them subconsciously. And what do we know about our subconscious mind? It's 90 to 95% of our whole brain. Our conscious mind is only 5%. So what I'm doing right now, all of our conscious thought processes, this is using 5% of that brain. 90 to 95% of our brain is subconscious, and there's so much that we don't know, right? We don't even know our own brain. And so I think it's really important to recognize, how many times do you feel like somebody owes you something, or society owes you something, or life owes you something because you've been through this very difficult time, or because you've been through trauma, or you've been through, I don't know what you've been through, but I'm sure everybody has experienced suffering at some point or another. We're all experiencing it. We all go through so much, right? And I think that's the whole thing where it's life does not owe me anything. I have to do my duty. And it's really as simple as that. Karma Yogam, and that's why Sri Krishna really talks about Karma Yogam so much. It's because it is relatively simple. When we start getting into Jnana Yogam and Bhakti Yogam, there are a lot more rules and sort of the proper procedure and ways to go about it. And it's not that it's unattainable. It's not that you shouldn't do those things. You definitely should, especially if you have this interest and you want to go and go down the thought process of Jnana Yogam and Bhakti Yogam. Please, I wish you the best of luck. At the same time, we shouldn't forget Karma Yogam. We shouldn't forget our duty. And I feel like a broken record, maybe because I've talked about this so much, but I feel like I keep saying the same thing. We just have to do our duty and not expect any sort of result. I want to kind of give a little bit more of an explanation on 2.38, but there's no consideration of happiness or distress, profit or loss, victory or defeat in the activities of Krishna consciousness. That everything should be performed for the sake of Krishna is a transcendental consciousness, so there's no reaction to material activities. He who acts for his own sense of gratification, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction, good or bad. Let's repeat that. He who acts for his own sense gratification, what does that mean? Touch, sight, taste. We know our senses. I don't need to explain that to you, but sense gratification, right? We experience the world through our senses. And so a lot of times, all the time, I would say, and especially in this yugam, especially in this day and age, we are addicted to instant gratification, right? Scrolling through social media, instant dopamine hit on dopamine hits constantly. We see that through our eyes. We eat good food that satisfies our taste buds, right? We see beautiful things like my apartment. I've decorated it to my liking. This is pleasing to my eyeballs. I am having sense gratification because I'm seeing things that I enjoy seeing, right? And if we're addicted to that, meaning I collect more and more items to fill into my apartment because I like the way it looks, what does that do? It again puts me back into samsara. So let's repeat. He who acts for his own sense gratification, so he who is addicted to gratifying his own senses, either in goodness or in passion, is subject to the reaction, good or bad. So I am subject to the reaction of what the world gives me. This goes back to what we were saying before. If I feel that my friend who I drove to the airport owes me, I am subject to their reaction. Next time I pick up the phone, in the back of my mind, I'm gonna have, they owe me. I did this big favor for them. And I'm gonna be hearing every word that they say with that filter. So take away the filter. Have that conversation just to have that conversation with a friend. Right? And that's basically how we can apply in so many different aspects. That presentation example, right? If I'm sitting there expecting, I did this great presentation for my boss and he didn't even say one thing to me. He didn't even say one thing to me. How dare he? He doesn't respect me. He doesn't respect my work. He doesn't respect my time. Those are the thoughts that are going to go through my head, right? What does that do? Next time I pick up the phone and I talk to him, I'm going to be having this like animosity. You don't respect me. And this lens, we talked about lenses before in my previous videos, right? It's like the glasses that you wear start to taint and start to conform and start to change the way that you see the world. So you take the glasses off and you're like, whoa, I chose to put those glasses on. I chose to see the world that way because of my subconscious belief system. Sri Krishna is really reiterating over and over again the importance of doing your duty without expectation of the result, because he knows that that's how this world operates. He knows, and he knew, right, that this world would happen this way. Let's go back to the fact that the cycle, Mahayugams, happen over and over and over and over again. This is samsara, the cycle of life. Obviously, God knows what the cycle of life is. He knows what Kali Yugam is. He knows the change between Dwapara Yugam and Kali Yugam to Satya Yugam. And he knows that he wants his atmas back to him. And so he's going to give us the tools. We just don't follow it. So I hope that helps in terms of how to practice Karma Yogam. Essentially, and we'll get into like pain and pleasure, because I love that concept of seeing pain and pleasure as the same. And it's like being pricked or being hugged, seeing those two things as the same. Seeing the way that we are interacting with the world, all of it as new experiences, right? Like a baby, and sort of like allowing for that inner child to like really experience the world. And like really experience happiness and sadness and pain and pleasure, and like let the dualities sort of just, move through you, and you are able to move through the dualities. Pain and pleasure obviously is one of those examples of duality. Happiness and sadness, sukha-duḥkhe. These are all dualities, and it's our job when we want to, escape from the samsara to surpass dualities. And it's hard. Right? But he assures us, Krishna assures us that Karma Yogam is the way to actually obtain that freedom from duality. Okay, now on to the benefits of Karma Yogam. And I've kind of like obviously alluded to this throughout the entire video, but by doing Karma Yogam, you will reduce your anxiety. You will be able to be calm. I have this thought process sometimes where I'm like, oh my gosh, I have anxiety. Where is my ashwagandha? And it's like, I don't look at sometimes what I did in that day to bring me to that anxiety. Like, I'm not looking at my actions. I'm not looking at the things that I'm saying to myself, but I want this external ashwagandha pill or, gummy to like make me feel better. And that's like our problem, is that we're always like trying to find these pockets of solace from our life. Why do we have all these different things, like these vices that we have? And we sit here and we argue for them too. We're like, but it's my only vice. It's like, why do you even need one? And so it's like one of these things where it's like, I think that instead of looking at what we're doing or how we're thinking in our day-to-day life, we look to, these small pockets of freedom or the small pockets of solace to escape from our life. When in reality, we can live our life in peace. We can live our life in peace when we start to escape duality, when we start to do our work and to do the things in our lifetime without expecting any sort of result. And I'm not sitting here preaching to you as if I've conquered it, right? There are many, many miles for me to go. But even just participating in this concept and even just entertaining this concept for a moment has granted me an immense amount of freedom. And that's the power of this, right? I don't want to discourage you by saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to become a karma yogi. That's not at all what the message is of this video. The message of this video is, when you start to do your work, catch yourself and say, I am doing my work. Jai Shri Krishna, and just sort of surrender the results to God. And just say Shri Krishna, Shri Krishna, Shri Rama over and over again. Or whatever mantra works for you. And just kind of, feel like I'm giving my results to God. And at first, it feels clunky. At first, it does feel weird, right? When I first learned this chapter 2, I was like, okay, it all makes sense. It's all well and good, but how do I actually practice it? And I noticed it was in those little moments. It was in those tiny little disagreements I had with my husband. It was in those tiny little moments of annoyance with my parents or my in-laws or with life in general. It was in those moments where I was like, okay, my job here is to be their daughter. And what do I have to do as a wife and as a child and as a member of this society? I have to give. I have to be understanding. I have to be loving. So even if they do annoy me, so what? Who cares? They're not hurting me, right? It's only because I have an attachment to them that they can hurt me. But if I let go and just say, you know what, these are just words. Yes, there's a time and place, when disagreements occur, there's a time and place and we all know how best to go about a disagreement with a loved one. We know the type of tone that we have to carry. We know the type of patience that's required. So in a calm environment, I will have that conversation, and that's how I can uphold my boundaries. See, I promised we'll circle back. I'm not going to become a pushover, right? Just because I've, become spiritually inclined. That doesn't mean like I, let anyone talk to me however they talk to me. But at the same time, it's just having this love for everybody and having the love for yourself, and more importantly, the love for Bhagavan. Because when you have love for Bhagavan, you have love for all of his creations, good or bad, right? And you sort of feel like, who am I to judge anybody? I'm struggling through life, stumbling through life, trial and erroring through life, just like everybody else, right? And we sort of have to take pause and be like, who am I in all of this, right? And, and because these spiritual concepts can be so great, I feel that Sri Krishna really gave us Karma Yogam, or gave us this concept and put a word to it and put a name to it and talked about it in so many different slokams, because he wanted to drive home the point that it can be as simple as doing your job and not expecting anything from it. I can say it in English, that's how I know it's simple. To kind of conclude the benefits of Karma Yogam, I want to refer to chapter 2, slokam 48. He says, perform your duty, O Arjuna, abandoning all attachment to success or failure. Such equanimity is called yoga. Right? And Sri Krishna tells Arjuna that he should act in yoga. And what is this yoga? Yoga means to concentrate the mind upon the Supreme by controlling the ever-disturbing senses, the ever-disturbing thoughts and emotions and sense gratification that we talked about earlier. We can really summarize the benefits of Karma Yogam very simply. Just act and turn your work into a spiritual practice. A lot of people tell me that they find it really difficult to go back into the world and work and care about all these like material things when they're so deep in their spiritual practice. I get that feedback all the time, that they find it so difficult to go back to work. And it's like, here's your answer. You can turn your work into a spiritual practice. We still have to show up to school. We still have to show up to work. And as we judge that everything is a material desire, we have a responsibility and an option to not partake in the material desire of it. Going to school is about getting an education. Going to work is about contributing to society. Me saying I don't like my job because of X, Y, and Z, because it's like, you know, contributing to capitalistic means. And I've said all these words. That's why they come so easily to me. But I've complained about, you know, the fact that we're living this capitalistic society and everyone is just constantly looking at the material world and every blah, 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 blah. I've complained. But what am I doing about it? Am I still partaking in material world obsession? I am if I'm judging, right? And like that is still part of samsara. And so I feel like our religion really encapsulates, like they really start to talk about emotions and thought as like a material thing. And we can get into that in a different discussion. But thoughts and emotions and sense gratification, all of what's happening right here is still material. So having judgment is material. Let's surpass that. And how do we surpass duality? Easily and in a way that's accessible to all of us. Karma Yogam. I hope you found this video to be helpful. You know, I think Karma Yogam is one of those concepts where it's a great way to start. It's a great way to sort of put your feet in the door. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. You know, I can make several videos following this. I myself have not finished the Bhagavad Gita yet, and so I'm sure that there will be more chapters to explain Karma Yogam and explain why it's so important. I focused all of my slokams, and I did the same thing with Jnana Yogam and Bhakti Yogam for the most part. I did include some chapter 6 and chapter 7 in there, but I focused chapter 2 on Karma Yogam because chapter 2 is the heaviest, and you know, it really gives us like a summary of what's gonna happen in the Bhagavad Gita and what Sri Krishna is going to be talking about. And I wanted it to be approachable for you. So, you know, you read chapter 1 and you read chapter 2. As you go through chapter 2, try to keep this video and some of the stuff that I've said in mind, just so that you can gain the depth of knowledge, because every word that he says means 1,000 words. And I think we have to take our time and really digest. But Karma Yogam is overall arguably one of the simplest things to understand, one of the hardest to practice and implement. It's a lifelong journey. Pace yourself and do your best, right? Even you just taking one step towards Bhagavan will make him take 10 steps towards you. So take that one step. You can do it. You know, you doing something is far better than doing nothing. So I will leave you with that. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.